Hey there, family. I am your brother by Emeritus Okaya, and this is Mtima Radi. Man, I have been waiting to produce this video for a very long time. I first received some of this information way back in 2019, probably before then, but I mean, it really started coming together back then. And I didn't have the clarity of thought, the sacred space, or the energy to bring it to you. Now, the ancestors say, I can tell you about this stuff. Let me start off by saying this. My mind has changed significantly on the idea of the Iceman's inheritance, though not completely. And the reason I say not completely is because something did happen. So let me tell you how the ancestors explained to me how things happened in the ancient times that made white people white. And this goes back all the way to even the Kaji. The Kaji are really the ones who helped me to centralize this and say, wait, there's some. That and Francis Cress Welsing, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, helped me to kind of centralize the fact that there's some truth to this. The Kaji tell a story about what they called the little brother. The little brother was born looking different than the Kaji. The Kaji are bronze-skinned, long-haired, indigenous people of South America. Little brother was born with thinner hair, though it was similar to theirs. Little brother was born with white skin and a complexion that was similar to theirs outside of the white skin. Now, little brother, the white man, or the white born person, did not want to follow the directions that the Kaji gave them on how to live sacredly. So according to the Kaji's mythology, little brother was sent across the seas with elders. They don't actually include the with elder part. The ancestors included that with me. And placed on in a location where they would learn to cherish the land, to respect Mother Nature, and all the like. I have stated before, and I'll state here again. For me, there's two meanings to this story. This is a literal meaning of what happened with the Kaji and little brother. They sent little brother to Europe. Number two, it is also a retelling of what happened on the lower to medium realms of the ancestral realms, or the lower to medium dimensions of the ancestral realms, where the little brother's spirit was seen as so disrespectful to the sacred attitudes of the people there that it was decided to segregate them, if you would, with elders to see if they could be taught what was necessary to elevate them to a level of comparative action or comparative elevation. No, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. Comparative actions, I guess, to those people who are already on the planet doing the sacred work and taking care of the sacred mother. Francis Cress Welsing tells a differing but similar story. I believe it was at the Melanin Conference that she told the story using the Bible as a psychological, at least Genesis, as a psychological um what is the word? Confession. As a psychological confession of what actually happened to push the white person into creation. Um and specifically she used the Adam and Eve story. She said, the Adam and Eve story talks about taking a bite out of an apple and then falling from heaven. And then from that point, you have children. And she says, well, from the standpoint of a clinician, we look at that as saying, wait, there's a connection here. Everybody focuses on the fall as the significant portion, when in fact, you may want to look at the child that was born. If the child was different, and don't forget, Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel. Cain slew Abel. Cain was different than Abel. And Cain is the one who then goes out amongst a people who are already there. They are not the first people on the planet. And we know this because Cain is able to find a wife. But for white people, who is the product of the fall, which Dr. Francis Chris Welsing said, from a clinician standpoint, they attributed the creation of Cain to the eating of the apple, meaning they assumed that they ate something wrong, and that then produced Cain. Cain, though, is able to go into the world that's already shaped and find a wife. And it is from Cain that the white race is born. Now, I adjust this story a little bit via what the ancestors told me. The reason the Bible is structured in the beginning the way it is because the psychological confession is told from the standpoint of white people. It is not told from the standpoint of the people who actually had it happen. For white people, they were kicked out of their parents were kicked out of uh heaven. They were kicked out of paradise. Well, where was paradise? The fertile area of of Africa. Now the question that lingers is, why were they kicked out? It's likely they were kicked out not because they ate something and had a bad seed, but because they were doing what the Kaji said that the people born there was doing. And the ancestors confirmed this. A group of albinos were born in the midsection of Africa, and while some were fine, there was a contingent that were not. They wouldn't respect the elders. They wouldn't respect the sacred customs. They wouldn't treat Mother Earth and everything that Mother Earth had given to them with the same type of reverence that the groups there had grown to expect. And so they were exiled. They were not only exiled, though. They first tried to kind of move them off a little bit and isolate them with some elders to kind of give them greater teachings, things like that. But then when it became clear that no, these people ain't about to adhere, and they were stirring up trouble amongst the tribes, they just kick them out of Africa. Kick them out of Africa. But not only just kick them out of Africa, because look, there were some who were born who were fine. So maybe we can rescue these people. They sent them into Europe, or Asia, actually. First they sent them into the Mesopotamian area, that Fertile Crescent right there, that area right there. They sent him there. And then those people migrated, technically, didn't migrate, but they kept going into what's called the Caucasus Mountains and stuff like that. And look, they were sent with really good guides, they were sent with really good elders, and everything was going fine. Until they didn't heed the warnings. Now, the ancestors, when they first told me about this, they correlated it to what's going on today with climate change. Some of the shaman begin to report back to the group because they were sent with a contingent. And this, again, this is in the Bible. It's just you have to go to the Exodus of Moses. They were sent with people who understood the traditional ways and who could communicate with the Father, Mother Earth, as well as people in Africa. And what they discovered, these shaman and medicine women, was that there was a big change coming and we need to start moving south, and we need to start moving south quick. They had a couple of generations to do this stuff. Now, a book that I've told you that you should be reading, and most of you probably haven't, is the Book of Jasher, Jasher. It's a rough read. It is a rough translation. It's supposedly from a Hebrew version of the book. But what it essentially does is it gives a longer retelling of the first 5 books of Moses. What is interesting about it is the extended stories of the traditional biblical stories that you know, they're fascinating. And they shed a lot of light onto the psychological confession that is actually hidden within the within the Bible, particularly the first 5 books. And there's a reason why the first 5 books are so important. In the Book of Jasher, when talking about Noah in the ark, what they reveal about Noah in the ark is that didn't happen overnight. The whole evolution from the time when God was like, you need to build this boat, to the time when God's like, yep, you feel that little bit of rain? That's the beginning. Wasn't like 20 years or 30 years. You're talking a couple of generations. Now, for this reason, I do not believe that Noah in those books, just like a lot of these other people who live to be 900 and something years old, they're not talking about one person. They're talking about an order. They're talking about a strand. They're talking about a lineage. So the Noan lineage built the ark, put down the plans, and prepared to board it, while the other generational people, because if you look at the Book of Jasher, the other generations passed them by. It's not like other people are like Noah and living 200 years. The generations are living typical years. Now, some other people obviously live in 90 years, some are living 60, some are living 40, but the generations pass them by. So this is a key point that is often missed in the Bible. You're talking about lineages, and you're talking about a strand that is so strong, it essentially carries the personality traits from one generation to another generation to another generation to another generation, which is an African concept. It's one long strand. So these people are told there's a big change coming. We got to start moving south. Well, we got time though. So let's finish up our work here. And they were fine. But as one generation shifts to another, particularly the mystery keepers, the elder keepers, something happens. Now, the ancestors have never been clear about what happened, but an argument does seem to have happened, and there is a section of people, significant section of people. You know, when you have a group of, like, what started out as 5 groups of like 150,000 people moving into an area, right? So 5 groups of 150,000 people, that's 750,000 people. And maybe it was less than that. Maybe it was more like it started out as 50,000 people and then it grew to 750,000 people. And then I know by the time the argument really took root, because it took a couple of generations for the argument to really take root. You're talking about a couple of million of people who were in the area doing this work. And you're talking of that millions of people, you know, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 people who are doing the actual elder work, the mystery work, things like that. An argument takes place. Now, how the ancestors are explaining it to me right now is there had been contention between the people doing what they considered the most work and the people who they considered not doing the most work. And this contention was amongst the albinism group. Those who were going out with the mystery keepers who were hunting thought that they were doing far more work than the people who were doing the agriculture. And because of this, and some other stuff that I don't necessarily understand, tension built up over the course of 2 generations. And some of the people who were doing the hunting began to say, we're doing the most work. And we're not really getting to climb up the hierarchy due to some archaic way of looking at things. We're not able to get into the deeper mysteries because these people over here who aren't doing what we're doing keep saying that we're not good enough. Well, how do we know they're not good enough? And the elder said, wait a minute, hold the phone. We are the keepers of the old ways. Yeah, well, we're no longer in the old ways. We're no longer in the old days. So what are you talking about? Maybe we need some new ways. Sound familiar? Yeah, but it's the old ways that kept us safe, kept us, healthy, kept us going, kept us prosperous in this area, kept us connected to our old people and Mother Earth, who has warned us that this great change. Yeah, well, how do you know you actually know what you know? Maybe you're just telling us that you know what you know, and you really don't have any clue. How many of y'all believe that these guys maybe don't have a clue? Few hands shot up. What about you? What didn't you want to get further into the mysteries and they told you weren't ready yet, but they wouldn't tell you why? Oh yeah. Or you wanted to do hunting, but because your people have always done this, they encouraged you to keep doing that. The person looked at, wait. The reason they encouraged me to keep doing it is because we are one of the few people that do that thing. So I understand. Okay, fine. Not you, but you. And they sowed dissent. The elders tried to quell it, tried to calm it. Look, guys, I understand what you're talking about, but trust me, we're on the path within the next 10 generations to get you all into the mysteries and to get us back home. Well, we don't want to wait. And a fracture started brewing. Until one day, and I still remember when I saw this, right? They were all gathering to talk about the coming generation. And they had just laid out the plan. They tell us in 2 generations, things are going to change here so significantly, we don't want to be here. So after the next 30 years, we're going to start moving back south and possibly even moving into the northern part of Africa. It was after this conversation, the ceremony, and everything, that the people who had been advocating to stop using the old ways, to break off and do something new, that they went to the elders and said, listen, we have a significant number of people to challenge you for control of this place. Now, realize something, fam. These people are democratic to the core, especially elders. Democratic to the core. Now, yeah, they'll fight, but that ain't the goal. And when it became clear that these people were like, so we're going to do what we're going to do, and you guys can do what you're going to do, but if you try to stop us, we're going to have an issue. So they went before the group, as was the custom, and said, this group of individuals here wants the right to take over the group. We are going to put it to a vote. The vote did not go that group's way. And by the way, they did not have the numbers. 100,000 elders in the mystery system, protecting the mystery system and everything. They had about 20,000 people altogether. But what the vote revealed was that while they only had the 20,000 outright, they had another 50 to 60,000 people who were willing to follow them. So, what was decided was to allow them to have a bit of a greater say. But this wasn't good enough for them. They plotted, they planned, they strategized. And over the next 10 years, they laid in wait. Something then occurred. An attack on one of the elders' compounds. It technically wasn't a compound because they didn't live in compounds. It was an elders' village. And it was secluded enough where people weren't confident who did it. But the result was a couple hundred elders were slain. And that tore the group up. There was calls to just excommunicate, get rid of everybody who had originally challenged the group, and then there was calls to just kill them all. There was obviously, the elders would not go that route. They said, look, we are people of rules and laws, and we're going to take care of this the way that we should. We're not going to act crazy. It was then that the group decided that they were being persecuted and that it would be best for them if they moved on. The elder group, wanting to keep the group together, told them, there's going to be major changes coming. You don't want to go, away by yourself without preparing for that. So stay with us for another couple of years. Let us prep you. Let us show you the ways. And then, you guys can go. They didn't want to hear that. So they reached a compromise. The elders sent a small contingent of about 2,000 elders, maybe another 10,000 people to kind of back them up, to take this group of now over 100,000 people who had decided that they would all follow this other 20,000, so about 120, 130,000 people, moved them off. They were in the valley of a nice hill area. I don't know if it was the Caucasus Mountains, but it was close. They would send them over to another hill, over to another mountain, and they could start their own place there. And they could do the work, they could teach them the mysteries, and to the extent that they could handle them and prep to move out before the big changes took place. Now, the ancestors tell me this. In the next couple of generations, the larger group still kept in contact, close contact with the other group. But the time came for the larger group to depart, to move further south. They ended up in Mesopotamia. They sent word to the others, to the elders and such, that they were moving. And that, look, a couple of years, you guys might want to pack up and come with us. They did just that. The elders, all but a few of the elders, by the way, left. And all but a few of the helper staff left. All because that group did not believe what the elders were telling them about the major changes. Well, what kind of major changes? We don't know. But Mother Nature keeps saying you don't want to be there. Well, Mother Nature doesn't know what the hell she's talking about, man. She's blah, 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 blah. They chose to stay with them. You know what the major changes were. The beginning of the next ice age. How odd is it that two of the largest movies in the last 20 years has to do with ice ages, right? When it became clear that things were getting bad, that's when the people who are supposedly in charge of the group wanted to act. The elders who were left had been encouraging that group to build enforced structures, because that's what Mother Nature and their contacts in Africa kept telling them to do. You want to dig into the mountains. You want to make sure that where you're digging is walled off wonderfully, so that you can make these beautiful pillars of fire, because you're going to want to keep warm. It's warm. I mean, it gets cold sometimes here, but it's warm. What are you talking about? It was only when things started appearing worse did this group start to act. And because of that, of the original 120,000 people, they lost about half of the mass. So about 60,000. Moreover, the toll of being up there shrunk that 60 down to about 10 after the first generation. They were dying very quickly. And by the way, the first generation was 20 to 30 years. So that shows you they were dying. They didn't know what to do. And the elders, every time the elders would tell them to do something, the people who had constructed the mutiny would be, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I mean, look at this. This is crazy. They just told you that things were going to change. They didn't say that they were going to be this bad. No, they did. You just didn't want to hear it. Finally, with 10,000 or so people left, and the caves, the tunnels that they dug into the mountains, finally complete to an extent. They found some really good sources of water in there, and they also found heat vents. And it was using these heat vents that they were able to do some stuff with cooking and yada yada yada. They found fire. And it helped them out a lot. But it was at this moment that there was a split in the group that was left. There were those who wanted to keep following the bull advice of the people who had started the mutiny. And then there were those who were like, the ones who keep the mysteries have been telling us the truth from the beginning. They predicted all of this, and they told us what to do. And now that we're doing what they told us to do, we're surviving. To hell with you. We ain't listening to you. there was a split. There was a split. And that split resulted in a group staying in one area of the cave system and another group staying in the other area of the cave system. When the first major thaw happened, the people who controlled the mysteries had dwindled to a couple of dozen who were doing that type of work. And they went out, they communicated with Mother Nature, and they came back in and they said, listen, we're going to have a few months. We got to get out here and we got to plant. On the other end, they went the other route. They went, we got to go out here, we got to get meat, we got to figure out ways to store it, and we got to do it now. On the side where the mysteries was still being taught, they went out and they hunted meat, they grew food, they learned how to, preserve it by listening to what Mother Nature said. They learned how to preserve the food, the meat, and they went over to the other side and said, look, here's how you can preserve what you're doing. And if you want to, do agriculture, this is what you do. But you're going to have to do it quickly. They didn't listen. The next stretch of winter, which lasted far longer than they were used to, killed a significant portion of them. So much so that many of the people resorted to going to the other side of the cave system and begging for food. They had enough, they shared it. But the people on the other end would not come over. The ones who were controlling the mutiny, they wouldn't come over because they ain't stooping to that level, apparently, right? When the next thaw occurred, they went back to it. They went back to it. The other side had dwindled significantly. From the 5,000, they were probably at about 15 or 1,600. This is when things got interesting for them. They finally listened. They started doing the agricultural thing. They, started doing the preserve thing. So it helped them out a little bit. But the answer is to say that the mentality of these people had really started shifting because of the problems that they were having. And the fact was that, and by the way, the reason why they had dwindled down to 1,500 wasn't just because people died. It was because people defected. They realized that these people have no idea what the hell they're talking about. We're going to the other side. But the mentality of that group who was left over there was in victim mode. They could not believe that they were the cause of their own problems. They could not believe that they were the cause of their own problems. Oh, well, I bet you the people who are the mystery keepers, I bet you they're casting on us, so we can't do this, we can't do that. They're poisoning the soil, they're poisoning the ancestors against us, so we can't do this and we can't do that because we know what we're doing. We've done it before. Yeah, but it was in a different climate and it was in different conditions. But they couldn't see that. They were delusional with it. They were destructively delusional with it. And no matter what the other side did to help them out, they saw it as a tool that was trying to be utilized against them to turn them away from their original decisions. This went on for a while. Even though the group who had mutinied got stronger thanks to the stuff that they were taught from those who were still doing the mysteries. This went on for a while, though, 10, 20 generations. And then something tragic happened to the ones who were doing the mysteries. The ancestors say that a sickness ripped through the caves, the cave system. And it was a combination of a couple of things that went wrong. One, a harmless bit of bacteria mutated in one of those heat vents and circulated and killed a whole lot of people. Cut the populations of both groups in half. When it was doing that damage, it took out the last vestiges of the mystery, the main mystery holders on that side of the cave. So now you had a group who had initiates into those mysteries, who understood parts of those mysteries, but they no longer had elders to continue to teach them in those mysteries. A few of the initiates were able to do some significant spirit work because they knew enough. They combined what they knew to do this work to get further instructions from the ancestors. But even this was limited. The result of those elders dying, basically, was that now for the next couple of generations, those people were going to have to fend really for themselves. They no longer had living almanacs who could tap into Mother Nature and say, this is coming, this is coming, this is how much you need to prepare for, this is how much you don't, blah, blah, blah. And as a result, sometimes they overproduced what they needed, sometimes they underproduced. And sometimes that underproduction was significant enough to cause them stress and problems. Then something great happened. A group of children were born, and it didn't take long to realize that these were very special kids. They were young elders with memories of the mysteries. Now, on the other side, at the same time, were born similar kids, presents from Africa. On the, quote, left side, because I've been using my left hand to signify this group, they cherished them, they honored them, they pushed them up, feeding their internal desires to know the mysteries. On the other side, they didn't. They saw these people as a threat to the way things were and the way things had been done. And so they ridiculed and criticized and drove these children into either abandoning what was clearly a mystery calling or abandoning the group. In fact, they turned more than one of those children over to the other group within a couple of years of its life and said, we can't have it here. Because those children were steeped in the mysteries and they had memories of the mysteries, they were able to help reconstruct certain aspects of the mysteries that the others knew nothing about, which prolonged their capacity to build a better group that was more in tune with Mother Nature in Africa. There was a longer thaw than typically normal. So typical thaws occurred 3 to 4 months. There was one thaw that took place, and though yes, it snowed a little bit here and there, it was significant enough where they could grow for quite a while. And the thaw was for about 10 months. During this time period, a part of the group tried to make it down, like they split the group in half, and part of the group tried to make it down to Mesopotamia. They didn't. They got about halfway there and they had to build shelter. And they were able to do it. They didn't not suffer any casualties, but the casualties were far less than could have been, particularly because on their way down, they were killing things and carrying those things using the techniques they had learned from the mystery keepers, right? So that was now a third group that was upholding the mysteries. And the other side, not during this thaw, but during another thaw that was like 10 generations later, they too would fragment. They would actually fragment into three groups. And each of those groups would take up a mountain. So the right side ended up in about 10 generations leaving the complex and going to another mountain to start its own complex. And you had now four complexes of caves in the Caucasus Mountains that held these different groups. The ancestors then tell me, and by the way, the reason the group fractured, because this was significant. This was significant. The reason the group fractured, let me see. Hang on, family. Sorry. All right, I'm back. The reason the group fractured was because during another prolonged period, this one a little bit longer, it was for like 20 months. And again, there was still snow. But it was such a thaw that, I mean, it allowed them to really do a lot of traveling. And during that time period, they went to these other mountainous areas and they scoped them out. And they found the mountainous areas, the mountains specifically, to be hospitable. And so the group wanted to move. They had a lot of people by this time. You know, their 1,500 was now, you know, 40, 50,000, maybe more. And so it was like, okay, let's move to a complex that we can have all to ourselves, because the other side has about 90 to 100,000 people, and they've been building, and it's clear that they're doing their thing. We need to do our thing. Well, they couldn't decide where to move to. That's it. They couldn't decide where to move to. And so a fight broke out. And some secrets got spilled about, oh, this person's dating this man's wife and all this other stuff. And what it resulted in was, okay, since, we don't want to go to here, here, and here, but we all kind of want to go to each one of them. Okay, who wants to go here? Raise your hand. All right, you 15,000 people? See you later. Who wants to go here? Raise your hand. Oh, you 20,000 people? See you later. Everybody else want to go here? All right, let's go. Let's go. Just like that. Now, here's the thing, fam. Here's what you got to understand about these people. You may be like, why the hell were they so petty? One of the things that they developed in this group. So don't forget, these people were still being initiated into the mysteries. They were still being taught the ancient ways. Well, one of the no-nos, one of the worst things you could do in the ancient mysteries from Africa was to engage in cannibalism, because the body is sacred. Well, as these people were not listening to what they were being told to do to prepare their meat, to, prepare their vegetables for storage, they were dying of hunger. And when they didn't have enough meat, they made a decision. We are going to start eating the dead. And they did. Not only the dead that they produced, but the dead that the other side produced. They would go on night raids and raid the cemeteries and then bury the plots with rocks to pretend like they never had been there. And then they would go home and they would eat the bodies. They didn't stop doing that, even when they didn't have to. They kept eating the bodies, particularly of those people who they thought were, even though they wouldn't say it, less worthy. Additionally, what had occurred during these generations that had passed was a hierarchy had developed within the cave system, which was unnatural. It was not taught to them. It wasn't brought from Africa. They developed it. Where the strongest, the people who did the hunting, and this again, family, the ancestors told me this for the first time in spring of 2019. The people who did the hunting were considered the tops. The people who served the hunters, the middle. The agriculturalists, the bottom. Below them, okay, technically not below them, but sort of below them, was everybody else. Now, the mystery keepers that they supposedly had, and they did have their own mystery keepers and things like that, they were the servers of the warriors or of the hunters. They were the servers of the hunters. When that fight broke out, it was amongst the people at the top in the middle. And the people at the bottom just chose sides. Sound familiar? So you had now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places that this stuff was developing. And over the next several generations, that's what happened. Now, one of the aspects of the mysteries that they preserved was that from the standpoint of Africans, the albino was something unique, was something beautifully unique. And it was a gift from God that was supposed to mean something special and brilliant. I remember when the ancestors told me, I kind of rolled my eyes with that one, right? But it was, because it didn't happen often. And if you look around at indigenous cultures, they say the same thing about albino animals. Albino animals are beautiful because they rarely ever happen. But as Francis Cress Welsing said, the whole goal with an albino, though, is to reroute itself back into the main population. With so many albinos, though, that was proven difficult. So even amongst, the parties that left Africa, there was enough non-albinoid people to make sure that the albinism turned back inward towards humanity. Well, the group that initially went against the elders, because all the elders were African, all of them were different shades of African, and the people who were climbing the ranks were albino. And only a couple of the albinos had reached the level of actually sitting where those elders were at. The people who broke off in that original main group, who originally mutinied, they were all albinoids. They were all albinos, all of them. And some of the people would later on have dark-skinned babies, even though it was two albinos making a child. They would have dark-skinned babies, and they would do their best to dilute that darkness with the albinoid so that that baby would be lighter in several generations. Now, there's one more thing that I do want to mention because I found it interesting when the ancestors told me about it. And I thought it was weird. So to give you an idea of the timetable that we're talking about from the standpoint of when the ice age began and when the ice age ended, depending on which paper you're reading, it either lasted 15,000 years or it lasted, I think the most I saw was 100,000, but I don't know if that was true. Either way, at 15,000 years, you are talking about what? 400, 500, nearly 500, I think. Yeah, about 500 generations. Okay. So I've covered history that is probably what? 40 or 50 generations. So a tenth. At 100,000, and I really don't believe the Ice Age was that long. Um, at 100,000, you're you're talking about 3 to 4,000 generations. Okay, so a long way to develop habits, to make them cultural, and then to embed them into the DNA, right? Um, at the time of the last ice age, there were still significant pockets of Neanderthals running around. Now, Neanderthals were beasts of a different kind. And those three groups would ultimately splinter off to some extent again. And it was maybe 100 or so, maybe 150 generations into the Ice Age when one of those splinter groups would come across some of these Neanderthals. The splinter group, actually a couple of the splinter groups, were having issues with procreation. They weren't producing enough babies. And uh, they may have even found themselves as men without women. They had little daughters, and but the daughters weren't old enough to have kids. And so there was a real threat that there might be extinction looming. The ancestors told me that this group raided a Neanderthal camp, killed all the men and a number of the women, and then took all of the child-bearing women, particularly girls and women, um, and brought them back. Now, mind you, Neanderthals were a rugged, rough, humanoid creature, but they were still humanoid, and they bred with them. They bred with them. In some instances, they brought back babies, raised the babies, and then bred with them. And that is how Neanderthal DNA got into European populations. Now, not all these splinter groups splintered because they were in bad relations with other groups. Sometimes they had to splinter because they didn't have any room. So, you would have a place that could only hold 50,000 people, but the population would balloon up to 90, and so 40,000 left, 20,000 here, 20,000 there. And because of this, they started spreading the word. Hey, you want a good time or you're having problems with women, having babies, raid one of these camps. These women and girls, they bear babies just the same. They come out, they look a little bit different, but they're there. And voila, more and more of them started doing this. In fact, because the first group and a couple of the other groups had domesticated Neanderthals so that they could live within their societies, Neanderthals became part of their breeding pool very quickly. Very quickly. And after a while, it was just a choice, because then what they could do is they could take the Neanderthals and send them into the camps, and instead of raiding them, they would become friendly with them, and then they would mate with the women, and sometimes even with the men, and that created a whole new amalgamation of humanoid. Again, I remember when the ancestors told me that, I was like, what the hell are you talking? Okay. So, that's it. Questions, comments, concerns, leave them below. I am your brother Vladimir Dees. Until the next one, y'all. Peace.